recording, and welcome everyone. Let's start with a blessing for our study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. And we are in Genesis chapter 3. And we talked last time about the serpent, the symbolism of the serpent, the game of telephone that takes place from how the human initially gets the instruction not to eat the fruit, to how Eve tells that to the serpent and says we're not allowed to eat it or to touch it. And then we talked about the concept of a fence around the Torah so that the halakha grows and grows and grows so that we protect the initial halakha, whatever that might be. And we are up to verse 4. So we're in chapter 3, verse 4. So the serpent said to the woman, oh no, we did that, lo mot tamutun, because we talked about that form in the Hebrew, mot tamut. You will not surely die. You will not die. Would be literally, but it's just for emphasis. The biblical Hebrew has this idiomatic form where it repeats the verb for emphasis. Okay, so we're on verse 5. Because God knows, Yodea Elohim, and Elohim is the generic universal term for God. So it's not Yod He Vav He. God knows that on the day you eat of it, and your eyes will be opened, apropos of Arnie's surgery, and you will be like God. What does it mean to be like God? Yoda'e tov vara, knowers of good and evil.
Women's commentary said you will be like God's, plural, lowercase but plural.
Yeah, well, so that's interesting, Owen. The word Elohim, which is the God, the generic word for God, is a plural form.
Okay.
So, but when we say so many times Adonai Elohim, which we translate as the Lord God, or Yod He Vav He, the God, we don't necessarily translate that as a plural. So it would be interesting to know. I haven't explored that if in every single instance in the Torah, as the women's commentary is translating it, if every time it says Elohim, if they say gods, plural, and my guess would be not.
Mm-mm. So here in Sansino, it said, ye shall be as God, but not plural.
Yeah, could you say, is it ye shall be, Y-E?
Right. Ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil.
It's clearly addressed, it's a plural subject. Hayitem, you will be, you all.
Okay.
It's definitely you all will be. David, I'm so glad you're here. We're talking about a matter of the Hebrew grammar, which is, I know, a passion of yours. So Owen was pointing out, we're in Genesis 5:5, that the women's Torah commentary in this instance translates Elohim as gods, plural.
And lowercase.
And lowercase.
Oh.
And it got me wondering if that is something that they do consistently throughout the text, or if they're doing it just in this case.
And mine isn't lowercase.
I do not know, but it'll give me something to go digging through.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously grammatically a plural form, but then it becomes a question of, do we translate it as plural or singular? And what I was saying, David, is Adonai Elohim, Yod He Vav He Elohim, which we translate as the Lord God, we certainly don't say it the Lord gods. So I'm not sure. That's like it's a tendentious translation, let's say. Yeah, Lisa?
So the Robert Alter translation is also gods, small g, gods.
Yeah, interesting. So, in this point, I think the translators are trying to make the point that they're trying to include all references to God. Barry K and Barry S.
A couple things. In Friedman, it doesn't speak of good and evil. It speaks of good and bad, which I prefer. But if I could digress for a moment, I've been giving a lot of thought to the apple.
Okay. Well, we didn't get to an apple. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, kind of, sort of.
And it's interesting that in this whole saga, the only thing that comes out well is the apple. The apple is generally historically considered a symbol of knowledge. You gave a shiny apple to the school teacher, which really had nothing to do with knowledge. It traces back to a Swedish or Norwegian thing.
I want to interrupt you for just 1 second. I definitely want to hear your excursus on the apple. I want to point out that nowhere in Genesis
does it mention the apple.
Does it refer to an apple? It refers to a fruit, the fruit of the tree.
And an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
All right.
And Steve Jobs may have been a space time traveler because brought back into time to make the fruit used an apple, because obviously the logo of Apple computers.
Yeah, there you go.
With a bite.
I think scholars have assumed that it was probably more likely a pomegranate, but that's also just a guess.
I would have thought maybe a fig, because they immediately grabbed the leaf of the tree, and
yeah,
it would be easy to grab the leaves off a fig tree. Although David mentioned a few weeks ago that the leaf is not really of a fig tree is not something you would want to grab a hold of. But anyway, I'm sorry for digressing, but I haven't digressed for a long time.
Yeah, so I'm going to digress further then. So I subscribe to this website called The Word of the Day, and every day it sends you like some weird word and, the definition and how to use it. And today's word of the day was pandowdy. Like apple pandowdy. That's I only know of pandowdy as being an apple dish, but it's
one other small thing.
Apple dessert pie thing.
What is pandowdy?
What's that?
What is pandowdy?
It's like an apple strudel turnover crisp thing. Apple pandowdy. It's a southern dish.
Like a turnover.
Well,
actually it's more like an apple crisp. It's where the apple.
There you go. So you see how well I got that definition. All right, Barry Kipnis and then Barry Singer.
I've said enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well,
all right. So you're telling us all the other instances of apple, but just so we know that the text does not refer to an apple. Yes.
Okay, so I'll give a slight reference on the apple. Don't forget Snow White and that poisoned apple.
Correct.
Okay, so we have to give the other side of the apple. No, I'm thinking of Elohim so much more of a general God phrase than Yud Hey Vav Hey.
Yes.
And it's almost like the snake didn't want to upset God more by being more direct and more personal by using Yud Hey Vav Hey. And Elohim is almost like a little bit more gentle insult.
Huh. Becca, yes, ma'am.
I've always sort of, and this is probably my own misunderstanding, when we talk about Elohim as being plural, my concept of it is that our God is in fact the plural of all gods. Our God encompasses all the aspects of all other potential gods because our God is all. It's very, it's just this very inclusive concept. So the Elohim, while it would normally mean multiples, I've assumed that the multiples are subsumed by our singular God as one.
So, I'm getting nervous as we're talking about that, I'm thinking, are we moving into like a Trinitarian idea of 3 in 1 or many in 1. Felix, yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any Talmudic support for this, but in my mind, Elohim refers more to the angels of God.
Very good. You know, as you started talking, I'm looking down in the Eitz Chaim, and in the Eitz Chaim, it's translated as you will be like divine beings. And listen to this, Felix, you right on. It says, the Hebrew word understood here as divine beings is a general term referring to supernatural beings and is often used for angels.
Ah, thank you. The other, to go back and to just, digress even further on the apple, is anyone really familiar, because I'm not, but I know of it, the legend of William Tell, who shoots the apple off his son's head, right? Who demonstrates his archery prowess by shooting an apple. And for me, that is symbolic of the apple representing the prohibition against infanticide. I know that's a stretch, okay, I do. But I to make sense of it in terms of Torah, what would the apple be if not a way to be more civilized and use knowledge to honor all life?
So yeah, let's just not commit to the apple. If we're coming back to the text, we're talking about the fruit. And I see my mom figured out daylight savings time and when to be here. Good job, Mom. And I want everyone to notice her incredible blooming flowers on
Beautiful.
Her window ledge. My husband is so jealous because he has 2 orchid plants that he babies and buys special food for and waters in special ways. And my mother does nothing but occasionally remember to put some water on her plants, but they're just in the perfect spot there with the perfect lights. he can't get these things to bloom for years on end, and she does nothing. So anyway, it looks really nice, Mom.
It's New York City air.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it must be the water, because that's why the New York bagels
Water,
are so much
right.
better. So that's why the New York flowers grow better.
Maybe they don't like being fussed over, and your mom's got the right way to take care of them.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Ron is nothing if not a caregiver. Okay, so it's interesting that we got all focused on the fruit, but we're talking about Elohim. You'll be like these powerful forces. And what does it mean to be like God? Again, coming back, knowing good and evil, or good and bad, as somebody had it. Oh, alternate translation, good and bad. When we speak about the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the inclination to do bad, that force within us that sometimes brings us to make poor choices. I'll tell you a great story we read in Musar recently about this very, very elderly, very pious rabbi, and there's a midah in Musar, a character trait of zrizut, which is enthusiasm, doing things, with passion, with enthusiasm, with alacrity, is often associated with the midah of zrizut. And one of the definitions of zrizut that I struggle with personally is that a way we exhibit zrizut, enthusiasm, is by getting out of bed immediately upon awakening, not lounging in bed. And I like to lounge in bed, so I feel like I'm a no-go at zrizut. So the story is this elderly rabbi wakes up in the morning, and he hears this voice of his Yetzer Hara inside his soul, telling him, you know, you're an old man, you know, you've been so pious your whole life. You know what, you don't have to jump out of bed. It's really okay if you just lounge in bed for a couple of minutes while you're waking up. And he says to his Yetzer Hara, well, it can't be that early if you're already awake. So that's Tov V'Ra. That we all have within ourselves this Yetzer HaTov, Yetzer Hara. But now if we eat this fruit, according to the serpent, we'll know the difference.
So according to the women's commentary, you will know all things. It doesn't talk about good or evil or.
No, so we've talked about then, that's very interesting. We've talked about this idea of a merism, you know, heaven and earth, male and female. Does it mean heaven and earth and everything in between? Male and female and everything in between. So they're interpreting good and bad as a merism for everything, which I think is a valid point. But the point is that they're going to move here, Felix, to help us out. They're going to move from unconsciousness to consciousness. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah.
So they're living.
Except with one qualification, Rabbi, that they certainly became conscious of the difference between good and bad. But was it even unconscious before?
Right.
Or were they completely innocent? That's what I struggle with.
Right. Just, you know, they were maybe like every other animal. How much do animals have a concept of good and bad?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
David, are you raising your hand?
Yep.
Okay.
About the question Elohim. In biblical criticism, you have the Yud He, Vav He, and Elohim.
Right.
Okay. However, it does say that Elohim is not exclusively a God name. It also applies to other gods and judges. So it's not a plural form when used to talk to God. It's talking to God's quality in a sense of, what did they say? As a judge of justice, but not necessarily as of a being. So it's not a plural term when you say Elohim, the one God, but you can use the word Elohim for talking of other gods, but not necessarily the one
It's
God.
generic. Elohim is not the Jewish God. It's a generic term for God.
Also for justice.
Right. So when we look at the attributes of God, the term Elohim is associated with the attribute of justice, whereas Yod He Vav He, the Jewish name for God, God's name, not generic, is associated with compassion. So when we say Adonai Elohim, we're combining both those attributes of justice and compassion. Yeah, Owen?
God says what his name is. The point at which he says, I will be who I am becoming as his name, that there isn't a name for God at this point.
We have seen Yud He Vav He, though, in the text.
Oh yeah?
Yes. So I'm not sure if this is the first instance, but I'm looking, for example, at Genesis 2:18. We had there, Vayomer Adonai Elohim, Yod He Vav He.
Or Exodus 3:14.
Oh yeah, well, Exodus for sure, but we're looking for what is the first use of Yod He Vav He. It's before that in 2:16. We've got to go back to the beginning and see what was the very first use. So in the creation, it's Elohim, Elohim, Elohim.
2:18.
Well, it's in 2:16 also. right? Elohim, Elohim. So it doesn't look like we have Yud He Vav He at all in chapter 1.
2:7.
2:7?
Yeah.
All right. Do I hear anything earlier than 2:7?
But also 2:6.
Yeah, 2:4. Ela toldot hashamayim ba'aretz hibar'am b'yom asa Adonai Elohim. 2:4. Yes. So 2:4 looks like the first instance, and I think we talked about it when we got there, but I already had forgotten what the first reference was. 2:4 looks like it's the first reference, and I'll read you again just as a reminder what we read at that time in the Eitz Chaim. Here's what it says. This combination of the unique personal divine name Yod He Vav He with the general term Elohim appears 20 times in this narrative, but only once again in the Torah.
Wow.
Yod He Vav He signifies compassion as well as protection and personal relationship. Its combination here with Elohim signifying justice is to indicate that these are two aspects of the one God. What's interesting is that that's such an infrequent usage in the Torah and yet so common in the liturgy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. I mean, we say it, dozens of times a day. Adonai Elohim, Adonai Eloheinu. So it's interesting that it's so infrequent in the Torah and yet gets picked up so commonly liturgically. Anyway, so what it is to be divine is to know the difference between good and evil, good and bad, right and wrong, or to know everything, to just have your eyes opened up to knowledge, to knowing. So this is how he is famously tempting her. And again, just looking at it from the feminist perspective, we want to remind ourselves that the woman is the first one who speaks to God. The woman is the one who shows curiosity, the intellectual curiosity. She's there, she's looking at this fruit. She sees that it's good. The idea of knowing, of having knowledge is intriguing to her. And when we look at the order of creation that is clearly moving from the more simple to the more advanced, woman is the last thing to be created, the pinnacle of creation, one might say. So, Vatera ha'isha ki tov ha'etz l'machal. The woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good to eat, and her eyes desired it. It was desirous in her eyes. So, we want to just think about, Lisa, I see your hand. Let me just finish this thought. Mm-hmm. Think about the association of desire with the visual. Later on, we're going to see, you should put tzitzit on the corners of your garments and look at them and remember my mitzvot. V'lo taturu acharei levavchem, and not go astray after your heart. V'acharei einechem, and after your eyes. Asher atem zonim achareihem. You know that verse it's the third paragraph of the Shema. So asher atem zonim, zonat is a whore, a prostitute. So you're and not go after your eyes that you whore after is really the translation. Our eyes get us in big trouble. We look at things, and that is the foundation of desire. So I'll stop there and let Lisa jump in.
Oh, I was just looking at the Alter translation.
Uh-huh.
And he translates it as and that it was lust to the eyes.
Lust to the eyes. I'm going to
Eyes.
write that down. That's altar.
Altar. And he talks about this being, linked to intense desire.
Yeah.
That Eve looked upon this tree and it created within her intense desire.
Yeah.
So I think this is all about chocolate, really.
So the fruit was a cocoa bean.
Yes.
Ah,
It was this big.
Yeah, your eyes are bigger than your stomach, right? Matthew, say more. Matthew wrote desire and envy. What are you thinking, Matthew?
that we talked about in Musar, that you see something, it's not desire, you're envious of it. Like, why do they have it and not I?
I was going to say jealousy.
Well, this is something we're struggling with in Musar, is trying to really just define envy and jealousy, and I'm not fully there yet with
FOMO, fear of missing out.
FOMO. Yeah,
what, Owen?
FOMO, FOMO. You know that acronym?
Fear of missing
Fear
out.
of missing out.
Oh, right. That's good.
Yeah, my daughter Sarah talks about my 1-year-old granddaughter Lily. So she has FOMO. She won't take a nap. She won't go to sleep because she's got FOMO. David, yes, sir.
One thing about a word we just talked about is if you're first new in Israel and you're ever invited to dinner and they ask you where you're from, be careful to explain that the state we live in is a state in the United States and that you're not from Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona.
Yeah. I stunned that family when I said that over a passport.
Yeah. Zona is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Barry Singer said that his translation, stone is a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable. So a little.
That's what I have.
Yeah, a little kinder translation, but I really like the luster that the altar, that it was lust to the eyes, because that's ta'ava is desire. So and v'nechmad ha'etz, and the fruit was it was pleasant. Here it says desirable. And what other translations do you have? The tree was fill in the blank.
Desirable.
That desired to make one wise. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, desire. Anybody have anything besides desire? Nechmad is really like pleasant. At least in contemporary Hebrew, that's how we use it. When we just talk about Shabbat, we say chemdat yamim, right? The most desirable of days.
In the Jewish Study Bible, it says it was a delight to the eyes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's the translation I have here. So, and it was delight, lahaskil, to know, to be, it translated here as a source of wisdom. You know the Yiddish term seichel?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
The same root as seichel, wisdom. Yes, Sarah Lee.
It goes further. It was to be desired to make one wise.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't only to be desired to eat,
Yeah.
but going ahead to find knowledge.
Yes, exactly. This was beyond just like, this is going to be tasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was.
Now, was she looking to
She was,
learn?
she was wondering. She, knew that she wasn't supposed to eat this fruit, and she's there, and she was obviously right there, looking at this tree and thinking about it, and the snake took advantage of her being in the right place at the right time and her curiosity. However, what we're going to see in just a second, okay. Vatikach mi pirio, she took of its fruit, vatochal, and she ate it. Vatiten gamla isha, and she gave it also to her man who was with her, and he ate it. So the whole, you wouldn't have even known that the male figure was even there until this moment. The entire interaction is between the snake and the woman, and the guy is just kind of like, standing by there. Who knows what he's thinking? We have no idea.
Unless Adam and Eve were joined at the hip.
Well, that was the Genesis 1 vision. Male and female, God created them, like a hermaphroditic being.
But it's
no,
also,
not hermaphroditic.
it's also
Like
the
a
first-
conjoined twin.
Yeah.
Because in the Babylonian and Numa Elish, which I think we referenced when we did Genesis 1, the first being in the Babylonian creation story was a male-female being conjoined together, and the creation process there was literally separating them and putting, one became the heaven and one became the earth. And remember, the female part that became the earth was Tiamat, and we said that was a possible etymology for Tehom in our story, that the Spirit of God is hovering above the chaos, this primordial Tehom, whatever that might be, and that etymologically might be connected to Tiamat, who is the Babylonian goddess whose body became the earth. So Becca, yes.
So I'm looking ahead at Friedman's commentary, and it's interesting on the topic of giving to her man with her. The commentary concludes with the snake speaks with plural verbs, suggested that he is including the man throughout the conversation.
Let's see. Oh, so when the snake spoke, so that was verse 4. Vayomer nachash el isha lo mot timutun. Yeah, it's definitely plural. You all will not die. Sarah Lee and then Matthew.
It also brings up the idea that she was not a selfish person. It was good, and she wanted to share it. And I think
that's so sweet.
the idea of share. That's one of the things we teach our children.
That's one of the things that loving partners do for each other.
Yeah.
That's so sweet. Matthew.
I was thinking along the lines that how classical theology blames the woman, apple, and yet the man was there and guilty of the act of omission of not stopping what was happening.
Very good point.
Equal blame there. It's standing by and doing nothing.
Right.
It must be seen as being more guilty of the sin in this case.
Right. Especially, Matthew, just to reinforce your point, which is a great one, that he was the one who heard the initial prohibition from God. The woman only got it from the man.
Right.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Why didn't Adam or the man jump in and say, "Wait a minute, no, don't eat that. We were told not to eat that." Yeah. Barry Kipnis.
Well, in defense of Adam, we all know how sometimes it's very difficult for a man to get a word in edgewise.
I don't use this line, but I've heard many rabbis at weddings tell the man when he goes to break the glass, "This is the last time you get to put your foot down."
Yeah.
So, however we feel about the guy, he's just like standing there. He's disengaged. The one thing he does is eat. Okay.
To be fair to both of them, though, until that point, the concept of negation didn't even exist. How would they even know that going against what was said before was something wrong or bad to do? There was no negation until that point. Was there?
So, well, in chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, let's see. Adonai Elohim said to the man, or to the human, you can eat of every tree in the garden, and that's achol tochel. So again, that's that biblical idiomatic form that we're seeing again and again already of emphasis. You may surely eat. Ume'etz hada'at tov v'ra, but from the tree of the knowledge of tov and ra, lo tochal mimenu. Don't eat of it, because on the day you eat of it, you're going to die. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the concept of negation is, but so are you saying that he got that warning, but he didn't understand what it meant?
Right. It was verbal. It was an affirmative verbal negation, but it was not an action of negation. In other words, it is like, well, I hate to do this, but I will. We were talking about the difference between jealousy and envy.
Right.
One of the main differences in psychoanalytic terms is envy is an action. It's not just a feeling. Jealousy is just a feeling. Oh, I wish I had that, or I wish. But envy is the action of taking something that doesn't belong to you from something or someone else.
That's not envy, that's theft.
What?
Yeah, I just, it's eluding me.
Yes.
I mean, I could say I'm envious of your library, and am I just misusing the term envy?
Yes. If
So
you,
I'm not envious. I'm not
unless
envious of your library.
unless
until I
you
break into your
snuck in
house
at
and start
night
cracking
and
it up.
taken a book.
Felix, you're
You
trying to
snuck
get rid
in at night and taken a book, then you're not misusing it.
Right. But if I'm just looking at your screen,
Yeah, then you're
say I
just jealous.
I
You're
envy your
jealous.
library. I'm not
Yeah.
envious. I'm just jealous.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
You analysts, I'm telling you.
I'm not, yeah, I just can't quite grasp that. But anyway, so, I think more so, I see Sarah Lee and Lisa, I think more so, Felix, is, not so much this concept of negation that you're teaching us, but what I've always wondered is so the penalty is you will surely die, you will verily die. How do they know what die means and that's a bad thing?
They don't.
Yeah, Sarah Lee and then Lisa.
Again, if the God had told him not to eat it, so when she offers it to him, he doesn't say, "No, I'm okay." He goes ahead and eats it, and he's
Right.
the one who had been told.
Right.
So,
So that's Matthew's point is where is he speaking up?
Right.
He knows, he heard it from God.
yeah.
Don't eat this fruit.
I heard it from God.
Lisa, did you?
I'm going to go back.
Yeah, the
I'm going
grapevine.
to go back to the snake a little bit. And
Okay.
I'm sure there must be commentary here. I don't think it's an accident that the snake is the animal here, because the snake sheds its skin, and it sort of becomes a new being, and just as Adam and Eve's eyes are open, they become new beings. They have a new understanding.
So they become it's a symbol of transformation.
Symbol of transformation.
Yeah.
That's great. Anybody else have the Eitz Chaim commentary? The conservative movement? No? Okay, so I'll read then, going back to the serpent, Lisa. So who is the serpent and what is its role in the story? Many commentators see it as jealous of the special gifts and status of human beings and determined to cause a breach between them and God. Others see it as the embodiment of temptation, particularly sexual temptation. The serpent may be a phallic image And the tree of knowledge may refer to the sexual awareness that accompanies coming of age. Still others see the serpent as the spirit of rebelliousness that arrives when a person moves from the innocence of childhood to adolescence, resenting the imposition of rules. If the serpent represents something within the human soul rather than outside of it, that will explain why it alone of all the animals has the power of speech. Some commentators see the serpent as God's agent. God wants Adam and Eve to grow up and become fully human, acquiring a knowledge of good and evil, rather than remaining at the level of obedient animals. So a lot of different interpretations there. And let's see, it looks like Kat and Michelle put something in the chat. The difference had once been explained to me as envy is, I want what you have too, and jealousy is, that should be mine instead of yours.
No, not correct.
Okay, Kat and Michelle, you stand corrected.
So it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coveting is coveting when the
Not covet.
the 10th commandment says not to covet. That is clearly understood as wanting what someone else has, not wanting something like what they have, but wanting, you know, I don't want to have a library like Felix's. I want his library. That's coveting. That should be mine. All right. Anything else on verse 6? So what about this business of the eyes being associated with the instrument of lust and desire and wrongdoing? And then, you know, we put a blue fringe on the corners of our garments. And when we look at those, we remember to make the right choice. And we don't go astray after our eyes.
I'm looking at verse 7 where it says, and the eyes of both of them were open.
Okay, well, let's move on to verse 7 then. I just wanted to give any
Oh,
opportunity.
I thought that's where we were. Okay.
Yeah, I was the last thoughts on 6, but let me just translate 7 first, Merle.
Okay.
And then you can have the first shot at it. Vatipachna einei shnehem, their eyes were open. And that was exactly the same verb that the serpent used to tempt them, was your eyes will be open. So exactly what he predicted would happen, happened. Their eyes were open. And what's the first thing? They knew that they were naked. And remember that the naked is the same word that was used to describe the serpent, as it was translated there as cunning, but it's the same exact word. They knew that they were naked. Vayitpru alei ta'ena, and they sewed the leaves of figs and made themselves loincloths.
Yeah, girdles.
So so Merle, you were going to say something about their
I
eyes being
was
open?
just thinking when I read this before I got to sewed fig leaves together, and when this translation says girdles, not loincloths. But when I think of their eyes being opened, I kind of think of the whole good and bad, jealousy, envy. Their eyes were opened to everything around them, and they started a thought process of what was going on, or what their own thoughts were about each other or anything else that was around them. It was to me, it was way more than they were naked and they made themselves a loincloth. It was, they started to realize what was happening around them.
They went from innocence to awareness.
Yeah.
Sherry has her hand. Sherry has her hand up, and then Owen.
I'm struck by the fact that it uses the passive voice. They didn't open their eyes. Their eyes were open.
Ah, very good.
Right.
And so is that volitional? Or what?
Is that what?
Volitional. of
Oh,
Yeah, no, it sounds like it happened. It was just a consequence of their actions. It was a natural process, not.
It's the process of applying meaning to stimuli, to whether it's language or visual or touch, it's applying meaning to it. And as I understand, for me, the idea of the tree of knowledge, it's not about good or evil, it's about applying meaning to the experiences that we have, we see, we hear, we feel. That's the difference between before and after and people and non-people.
maybe it's the first instance of a psychoactive substance causing a mental state to
Yes,
occur.
that must be it.
That explains
Came out
chocolate.
of
I'm trying to think, what's a psychoactive substance that occurs in nature?
Chocolate.
Chocolate, back to chocolate.
chocolate.
Mushrooms,
Mushrooms. Yeah, that's it. So it was some kind of a mushroom that they ate.
marijuana.
Yeah, there you go.
Peyote.
That's, yeah, was trying to think
That's
of some
it.
of these examples. Yeah. David?
If they're told to stay away from the tree of life, and then she eats from the tree of wisdom, that is one tree, or are we talking about two trees?
I think it's two trees. And the issue is that they were initially told about the tree of knowledge of good and bad. And then the reason they're going to get kicked out of the garden is because there's another tree. That's the tree of life. And the fear, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but we'll get there. The fear was, okay, now if they eat from the tree of life, they're going to be immortal. And, we can't have that. They need to be mortal. But hold that for when we get to
One
that.
tree, they become aware of what the world's like, but they lose the trust of the master gardener, and they're dumped out because he doesn't want any other gardeners, any other masters in the garden.
Yeah, if you look at 3:22, that's where we're going to get to the tree of life.
And the tree of knowledge was in the center of
Right.
the garden.
Mhm.
So why is it that the minute they come into awareness, the first thing is that they become aware of being naked and want to cover that?
Because they feel vulnerable.
Does that brings up something of shame?
So they feel vulnerable, they feel ashamed.
I wonder why they don't say, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Why don't they feel aroused?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I find it interesting that they all, in the commentary, that they all of a sudden understand that their body should be covered. Where do they get that understanding?
Yeah, that's
from?
what I'm trying to draw the connection between.
I'm trying to, is it possible some of our answers are based on our life experiences? We're covered because we're ashamed, yet you go to other beaches and other cultures, the amount of coverage is considerably less or none at all. And the word shame does not pop up at all. So are you answering, we were ashamed because that is our culture, not to show our parts? Or are we, I don't know. You see where I'm trying to go with this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, we spent two
I'm gonna let Owen answer that.
We spent 2 whole weeks on the concept of shame and how culturally situated it is.
I see where you're going with that.
There was no culture to look at and at this point,
So
other
where
than
are
each
we
no
other.
contact.
applying the word
Exactly right.
shame to?
Say again?
Where are we applying the word shame to, that they had to put clothing on? What did
Yeah,
they?
no, it doesn't say that they were shamed. It just says that when their eyes were opened,
That they were aware.
they perceived
Yeah.
their nakedness and felt motivated to cover their nakedness. Now they're in a world of presumably no other people, and the, you know, animals are all naked as well. So
Right.
why was their coming into knowledge associated with, you know, the first action is, oh, I need to cover myself.
Right. There is no cultural context for that at this
Right.
point, with just the two of them.
Right.
The
Yeah,
only
That's
thing
what I don't
I can,
understand.
the only thing I can think of is that they noticed that they were different, and maybe they also noticed that they felt differently, that they were of two different minds or moods. In other words, they felt a misattunement between themselves, and they needed to cover that up. They needed to make believe like everything was all right.
Yeah. Like if I can't see it, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Lisa?
So I'll stretch this a little bit. So, or maybe a lot. So when God creates Adam and Eve, they are they're different than every other creature. Once they have this knowledge of what's going on around them, maybe the realization is that they're not not different than the rest of nature around them, and like so many animals where their private parts are
Private.
covered, yeah, or you know, not very apparent, they seek to become, or this is symbolism of now they're part of nature and not separate from it.
Well,
So
if
I'm
you
going to
around-
let Becca has her hand raised. I'm going to let her jump in, but it does beg the question, Lisa, of the obviousness of the male versus the female genitalia. So I think what you're saying is true of the male, a human female, the genitalia is pretty not obvious. But
Yeah,
anyway,
but in nature, you know, for so many animals, the male genitalia is not particularly obvious either.
yeah. Becca?
So we're making the assumption that the discomfort they feel or their reason for covering themselves is a discomfort in looking at each other. However, and I know I'm skipping ahead a couple of lines, but is it also possible that they are discomforted by now they think revealing themselves fully to God? Because a couple of lines from now, God is going to say, where are you? I mean, their magic shield has been broken. So why is there the assumption that they're uncomfortable displayed in front of each other, when in fact their discomfort might be displayed in front of God?
Yeah. So there's no answer. So it's all speculation. We just know that something has dramatically changed in their awareness, and that their response to it was that they need to cover their bodies. And they made chagorot, translated here as loincloths. Somebody else had girdles. I think, David, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't chagor in modern Hebrew a belt?
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
and it depends on how you mentally think of the word girdle. Because if you're thinking of what women have grown up with in America in the last 70 years versus what a man would wear in times of Rome, Greece, or India, they're all types of girdles, but they're all extraordinarily different.
And it's clearly, in all these instances, something that's covering the lower body. So
That's not it.
the woman is not covering her breasts, the man is not.
So if it was just,
his
and a
chest.
covering was made and not use the word girdle, it might be a little bit easier to kind of figure out what is being said.
Yeah, but the Hebrew is chagorot.
Think about the phrase to gird your loins before
Yeah.
you went into battle.
Right.
You'd cover your, the part that could be most hurt.
And
All right, let's
so-
see if we can introduce one more verse in the last few moments here. So, in verse 8. So they heard the voice, Vayishma'u, you know that verb shema, to hear. So they heard the voice of Adonai Elohim. Now we have, this is the more particular name of God, the Lord God. They heard the voice. This is a very anthropomorphic image that we have here. So they heard the voice of Adonai Elohim walking himself, mithalech. It's a reflexive form. It's not just walking, but it's a reflexive form of walking. I could only translate it walking himself in the garden. And I love this, leruach hayom. Ruach is, we use it, it's one of the words for soul, but it also means a breeze, a wind, in the wind of the day. And the man and his woman hid themselves, again, the reflexive verse, vayitchabe, from the face of the Lord God, betoch eitz hagan, in the middle of the tree, it's a singular, the tree of the garden, but translated as trees. So they become aware of God's presence. And I love this idea. God is going for a late afternoon walk, and they hear God's voice. So who is God talking to? And what is God saying that they hear God's voice going for, is God like on the phone? Is God whistling to himself? How do they hear God's voice? But, it does beg the question of Felix and Owen, our psychologists, of, is this whole thing an internal process that's being described? Is the serpent just, the speaking to the woman within herself? Is the voice of God something that they are hearing within themselves? How much of this is external and how much of it is internal? Yes, Sarah Lee.
It also says that, he is, they heard the voice, but he's walking. That makes him more anthropomorphic,
Right.
Walking
Right.
is an image of a human being. They don't say they don't hear him walking. They hear his voice, but he's walking.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept there.
Very much so. So Lisa, you're going to get the last word for today.
So the altar translation here is, and they heard the sound of the Lord God walking about in the garden. So in the altar, there's no suggestion of God talking or.
So yeah, call is sound, not voice.
Yeah.
So here it says they heard the sound of the Lord God moving about.
Yeah.
Call literally does mean, well, I know it could be sound, because in the Kabbalat Shabbat Psalm, Kol Adonai al Hamayim. But we do translate that the voice of God is on the water. Kol Adonai Shover, the voice of God.
God spoke and the world came to be.
Right.
They heard him crunching around in the leaves.
Yeah, and Stone says sound also.
Looking for gluten-free.
I just want to look up the psalm number of that psalm. It's Psalm 29. So anybody who wants his homework, you could look up Psalm 29 and study the translation there. See if it says voice to you or sound. But it's Kol Adonai Chotzev Lavotesh, Kol Adonai Yachil Midbar, Kol Adonai Bakoach, Kol Adonai Al Hamayim. It's the entire psalm is talking about the voice or the sound of God. But anyway, I have another commitment, so I have to run. Please join us this afternoon. I'll put up once again, for those who came late, the link for this afternoon. please sign in before 2 o'clock because the doors of the theater are closing at 2 o'clock. So you need to be signed in and ready to go right at 2. And it should be a wonderful performance and an interesting conversation.
Thank you.
And with that, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Puya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'yimru. Amen.
Nay.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye now.